again from Iowa State University. Dr. Nelson completed his postdoctoral studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and then he came here to UF, joined the faculty here in the Department of Animal Sciences in 2013. His research focuses on antibacterial mechanisms of the bovine mammary gland and the role that vitamin D plays in the immune system. And overall, he has a interest and expertise in transition cow management and the interaction of calcium, vitamin D metabolism with health and production of dairy cattle, and he's going to speak with us on that topic today. And just before we start, I'd like to just let you all know that there will be a very short couple of minute talk at the end of Dr. Nelson's talk, so please don't all leave for lunch right after his talk. Thanks.
All right, can you hear me okay? All right, thank you, Dr. Manzel. I'd like to begin. This is basically a summary of the results of one of our milk checkoff projects funded in 2015-2016. And it's really the credit here needs to go to Dr. Santos. This is largely his project, and I've been involved with it. And his student, Camilo, is really the one the student that was in charge of doing much of this project. Dr. Santos couldn't be here. He's taking a year sabbatical, so he asked me to present this for him. So I'll do my best at getting the message across here. I need to recognize Dr. Jimena Laporta too. She did some work on looking at the health and growth of the calves from these cows that were born too. So we got a lot of information how to do in this project. This project, effects of prepartum acidogenic salts on calcium, really focuses on management of hypocalcemia in the dairy cow in that postpartum period. So for several years now, for quite some time, you guys have known that clinical hypocalcemia is very detrimental, but really what's been highlighted in the last few years is the effects of that subclinical hypocalcemia, and really the underlying negative effects of that we don't really see those immediately, but that subclinical hypocalcemia, that minor drop in blood calcium really has on the health of the cow. And so for several years we've known that, yeah, there's that subclinical hypocalcemia decreases immune function of the cow. And that really makes sense, that those immune cells require calcium for that activation of those cells. So if you decrease the availability of calcium, you're going to get immune suppression. So it quite makes sense that that's going to be a negative impact. But I really like this figure here to kind of drive home the point on the negative effects of subclinical hypocalcemia. This is from a study that Dr. Santos and his group had done several years ago, published in 2012. And you can still hear me? Okay. And so in this, they look at the probability of metritis here, and then the drop in calcium here. This is in milligrams per deciliter of calcium. So you can see for each unit drop in calcium during that postpartum period, this is in 3 days, and first 3 days in milk, you have a 22% increase in the risk of metritis during that period. So this really drives home the impact then of the negative impact of that subclinical hypocalcemia that's occurring. Because this is, you're not going to notice this drop necessarily in terms of visually in that cow. You're only going to be able to detect it by making those measurements of calcium. So, you know, we've done quite a bit of work then over the years to find out how can we manage that postpartum period to really minimize that drop in calcium. What can we do to do? So there's been many different treatments that have come out. Use of vitamin D metabolites for that, use of calcium bolus, different dietary strategies. One of those that I think has probably been the most effective is that negative DCAD diet, feeding those acidogenic salts, those salts that lower the pH of the blood. It really is effective in helping that cow mobilize the calcium. So this has probably been one of the most effective tools in terms of decreasing the incidence of really the clinical hypocalcemia, the milk fever. It's really minimized the incidence of that, but it's also minimized the amount of this subclinical hypocalcemia as well. So here you look at cows on a prepartum positive DCAD diet. you have many that are really in this, they have a severe drop in calcium, versus those that are in the negative DCAD diet over here. There's some that have that subclinical hypocalcemia, but a much less severe hypocalcemia that's occurring there. So this has been a very effective tool. With it, though, there's problems. It's not the perfect solution. There are negative consequences. You're feeding cows a acidogenic diet, so there's consequences to this. One of the major consequences is that reduced prepartum intake that occurs with this feeding these acidogenic diets. So this is just a plot here looking at adjusted dry matter intake versus the DCAD of the diet. So you can see as you drop that DCAD, there's a drop in dry matter intake. So this is something that's well known, and really it's a concern for us too, because we don't want those cows to be dropping their dry matter intake during that prepartum period. We want to be able to maintain that as best as possible. So we have to weigh out the positives and negatives in this whole scheme. So this really led to the treatment design, the project that Dr. Santos proposed a couple years ago, is to look at really the level of negative DCAD. How severe, how far can we drop the level of DCAD and not really have a real negative effect on the cow postpartum. And really the idea was that these ranges down here, you could be in this range right here, and really there wasn't going to be much of a real severe negative impact of that. So the overall hypothesis of this project was reducing the negative DCAD from -70 to -180 milliequivalents per kilogram dry matter, and extending the duration from 21 days, that's the typical time frame that we go, to 42 days, wouldn't really affect performance and metabolism in these cows. So the overall objective is really to test that hypothesis, and using a treatment design where we had cows in either -70 or -180 negative DCAD, and then 21 versus 42 days. And then looking at postpartum performance and metabolism in those cows. So the experiment was set up as this. We had 114 Paris cows at 233 days of gestation. They're enrolled and put into the experiment. And we had two different, as a 2 by factorial of arrangements. So we had 2 durations of feeding and 2 levels of negative DCAD. So we had 21 versus 42 days relative to expected calving date, and then -70 versus -180 in the negative DCAD. So to help you visualize that maybe a little bit better, so when we put these cows on the dietary, started the treatments, at the beginning we had 2 groups here that were on the positive DCAD for the first 21 days of that feeding period. So -42 to -21 relative to calving. And then we had 2 groups that were either at -70 for DCAD or -180 for DCAD for those first 21 days of the feeding period. And then for the last 21 days of the gestation period there is either the negative DCAD at -70 versus the negative DCAD at -180. Then at postpartum, they're all in the same diet at that point. So the key measurements that we really looked at in this were acid-base status of the blood and urine pH, concentrations of minerals and metabolites in blood, colostrum yield and composition, prepartum dry matter intake, postpartum dry matter intake, and lactation performance, and then daily body weight and weekly body condition scoring. So this was analyzed by ANOVA, and then the different comparisons that we did is the first 21 days of that dry period compared positive DCAD versus a -70 or -180. So we could really look at the positive versus negative DCAD during that period. And then from day -21 to 42 days postpartum, we looked at the effects of the -70, -180, and then also the duration of the DCAD that those cows have been on. So whether or not they were on the long DCAD, the long duration DCAD or the short duration DCAD. So here's the diet composition. So the major components, corn silage, triticale, and Bermuda hay. So around 34% corn silage diet there. To make the acidogenic salts that we use is biochlor here, and so you can see the levels of the biochlor that was used in there to generate that negative DCAD that we were shooting for. Here's the actual analyzed diets after we had fed them, what they had turned out to be. So the level, I'll draw your attention down here. The percent chloride in there, you can see that increases with the level of negative DCAD, and our actual level of DCAD was pretty close to what we had targeted it to be. So our actual level here is minus 66 and minus 176, so fairly close to what we had targeted. So here to begin with the results. Urine pH is a generally very good indicator of whether or not you've induced that metabolic acidosis or dropped that pH of the cow. And so you can see, starting here at the beginning, the cow's on the negative 70 and the negative 180 negative DCAD diets, then their urine pH dropped very quickly as expected. Just to orient you to these the treatments here, because most of these graphs will have the same treatment designation. So the short are the negative 70 diets will all be in the filled circles or black symbols, and the negative 180 will be all in the open symbols, and then the short will be the squares and the long will be the circles. So then you can see that for the cows that were on the short DCAD diet for the short duration period, once they started on those DCADs, their urine pH dropped rather quickly, as would be expected, and the cows on the negative 180 had a lower urine pH than the cows on the minus 70. So just demonstrating that yes, our DCADs, the level of our DCAD dropped the pH in the manner of what we expected it to be. So here's probably one of the most important indicators of what we wanted to look at then was total serum concentrations, serum calcium concentrations. And so as you can see from this, there's really not much of a difference at all between the different groups. And when we analyze the prepartum differences and postpartum differences, there was no difference in total serum calcium in these days just post-calving here, between the level of DCAD and the duration of the DCAD. So dropping that DCAD from minus 70 to minus 180 didn't make a difference in terms of improving postpartum calcium. But so the minus 70 was equally as effective, but the minus 80, so both of them were equally effective in maintaining or limiting that drop in calcium. Same thing for phosphorus. It's another one that's going to drop similarly to calcium during that period. So no difference between the level of the DCAD or the duration of the DCAD in terms of serum phosphorus. So again, these are two kind of critical endpoints there that we're looking at in terms of how does the level of DCAD affect these two minerals in the blood during this postpartum period. In your notes there in the proceedings, there's also the results for NEFA, BHBA, magnesium. Same outcome for them. There's no difference between level of DCAD and level of or duration of the feeding. So I'm going to skip over those and look at some of the other measures that we were quite interested in finding out. So here's the acid-base status, or markers of acid-base status, so blood pH, CO2, etc. As we expect, the level of the DCAD had an effect on each one of these here. So the animals that were in the negative 180 diet there, they had that level of that DCAD had an effect there, but the duration did not have an effect on any of those markers of acid-base status. Here, blood ionized calcium. So as you drop that pH, as you increase the acidogenic salts, you're going to release more of that bound calcium, so you have more free calcium as would be expected. So as we drop the DCAD, we had an effect there on the blood ionized calcium prepartum. So then really the other critical endpoint then is postpartum performance of these animals. So this is looking at colostrum yield and components. So from this, from each of these here, the level of DCAD and duration, when you look at each one of these components here, did not have an effect. So colostrum yield, the fat, protein, lactose, solids, there was no effect of DCAD on any of these. And if I remember correctly, Jimena, there's no effect on colostrum IgG. No effect on colostrum IgG either. That wasn't shown here, but the level of DCAD and duration of DCAD did not have an effect on colostrum. Now, in terms of the actual lactation performance, we did see an effect in terms of milk production, total milk yield here. So the duration of DCAD had an effect here where the cows on the longer duration the cows on the longer duration here had a less milk production than the cows on the short duration, and much of that really came from the cows here in this -70 group. But then when you look at fat-corrected milk, there's no effect there on duration or level of DCAD. Fat yield, protein yield, no effect of either duration or level of DCAD. There was an effect here of duration on lactose yield. So again, those cows that were on the longer duration DCAD diet, they had a decrease in lactose yield. And then a minor effect there on the solids. In terms of body weight, really the overall, you see differences right here at the beginning, but there's no effect of the level of DCAD or duration of DCAD, either prepartum or postpartum. There was an interaction, and so you probably noticed quickly a mistake here in this plot, and these should be the black squares right here. So this should be a -70 short DCAD diet. So there was an interaction there, but critically I think there's no postpartum effect or postpartum main effects of DCAD or duration or interaction between them. So here's the dry matter intake during this period, and so starting prepartum to postpartum. And during that period, you kind of ignore the first 7 days here because these cows are still kind of adjusting to the feeding period there. But you can see the cows that are on the short, the squares here, so the short -180 or the short 70. So in this period, they were still on the positive DCAD diet. So you can see their dry matter intake was greater than the cows that were on either the -70 here in the dark circles or -180 in the white circles, open circles. When we transitioned at the -21 days, then the cows that were on the -180 short period, they dropped quickly to match the cows on the -180. So there's a difference here. The cows in this the long period on the -180 had a decreased dry matter intake versus those cows on the short period dry matter intake. So that length of DCAD does have an effect there on that dry matter intake during this period, which has some concern there because we want to keep those cows eating as much as possible during that time too. So really overall, the kind of the conclusion from this, that feeding that negative DCAD diet, it did reduce that dry matter intake for that first 21 days of that dry period. So from that -42 to -21 during that period, there was a decrease in dry matter intake. reducing the level of DCAD from -70 to -180 in the last 21 days of gestation. That did reduce dry matter intake as well. Had a more exacerbated metabolic acidosis, but it did increase the concentration of ionized calcium during that period. So really a couple of the main take-home points from this. Extending that duration of negative DCAD, it really had minor impacts on the blood ionized calcium measured as acid base. So it didn't really influence it all that much by extending the duration. Extending that duration, though, it did have of negative DCAD, did have a decreased milk yield and lactose yield when fed for a longer period of time. So the longer we fed that negative DCAD diet, there was an effect there on milk yield. So something to keep in mind for that. But the concentration of minerals and metabolites were not significantly affected by either the level or duration of DCAD. But when you look at it all together, we don't really see an effect at all of that -180 DCAD on that longer duration time. So it kind of, when you put this all together, and really to sum it up, I think the main take-home point is that feeding that negative DCAD diet within, whether you're in that -70 to -180 range, within the typical 21 days there, you're not going to have a significant impact there, as long as you're within that range of -70 to 180, you're going to have the maintenance of calcium that you're really targeting to get during that period. You do have somewhat of a decreased dry matter intake with that, the negative 180 cows, but it doesn't, at that period within 21 days there, you don't have a severe negative effect on post-lactation or postpartum performance there. So with that, really the thanks goes out to the students that carried out much of this trial in Dr. Santos' group. The funding is from Southeast Milk Checkoff and Arm & Hammer Nutrition for their funding as well. Thanks to the Dairy Production Conference Committee, and happy to take any questions if we have time.